Wish TV, All Indiana Politics
is your premier source for Indiana politics.
Focusing on issues that matter to you.
In-depth, nonpartisan coverage, exclusive interviews with Indiana's political leaders, expert analysis on critical legislation. From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Don't let high golf rates drive you out of bounds. Save big with the Wish TV Great Golf Club Card.
Central Indiana's largest golf club card membership is back for the 8th season with more courses than ever before. Save over 75% on tee times at 27 Central Indiana golf courses. All you need is the Wish TV Great Golf Club Card. Cards are valid for the entire 2026 golf season.
Great courses, great savings. Score your Great Golf Club Card today.
Now, from Wish TV, your local news source, this is All Indiana Politics.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome to another edition of All Indiana Politics. I'm Phil Sanchez. Iran poses an economic and cyber threat to Indiana, but not a traditional threat of terrorism. That's according to an expert on Central Asia and the East at IU. He tells our government reporter Garrett Bergquist vigilance is still a good idea.
Let's bring in Professor Jamsheed Choksy. He's the director of the Inter-Asian and Uralic National Resource Center at IU. Professor, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Right now, what is the biggest threat Indiana specifically faces from Iran?
The biggest threat, of course, as we can see on a daily basis, is at the gas pumps. Iran is blocking the Straits of Hormuz. And as a result, even though the United States actually gets only somewhere between 2.5% to maybe 7% of its oil from the Persian Gulf region, the global prices are going up, and therefore the prices are going up in Indiana.
There's been a lot of chatter about the potential risk of retaliatory terror attacks from Iranian-backed groups or lone wolf-style terror attacks. How does the threat of lone wolf attacks compare to the sleeper cell threat that's often bandied about?
Right, so lone wolves and, shall we say, attacks instigated directly through by Iran through individuals are the ones we have seen in the United States previously. Occasional attacks on Iranian Americans, a foiled attempt against the Saudi ambassador some years ago, and of course, a plan to assassinate President Trump.
So far, Iranian-backed proxies in the Middle East have had only very limited success. Does that suggest that the threat of organized attacks, at least, is low?
Within the U.S., low. Across the region, what we have seen, particularly after Iran's proxies were essentially decimated over the past year, we've seen that their ability to strike back has decreased. Hamas, particularly against the United States, even though they have some attacks against Israel still. Hezbollah has diminished greatly the threat. Syria, that used to be a major ally of Iran, has a completely different government, is off the American terror list, and in fact is actually working with the United States. And at least so far, the Houthis in Yemen have taken a back seat.
Here in Indiana, we host so many large sporting events. Indianapolis is about to host the NCAA Final Four. We're also hosting the NIT. Coming up in May, we've got the Indianapolis 500 and all the festivities attending that. How worried should people attending those events be about a possible Iranian-inspired or connected attack?
I would say we should trust our local and federal authorities. They do a superb job. We have not seen that sort of attack or capability by Iran. In fact, when the Iranians have attempted, and when I say Iranians, I mean the Iranian government, when they have attempted to conduct attacks in the United States, they have actually bumbled them quite badly.
What can we do to minimize the threat of a terror attack?
I think what we should do is, of course, be vigilant, but we should not profile. We should keep in mind that the ability of Iran to actually reach the mainland U.S. is minimal. Some of our listeners and viewers may have read about the possibility of drone strikes, the possibility of Iranian drones reaching the East Coast, the West Coast, let alone the Midwest, is extremely unlikely.
I want to turn this conversation on its head now. How do we maintain vigilance against terrorist attacks without vilifying Iranian Americans or Muslims?
That's a good point. And we should keep in mind that Iranian Americans came to the United States largely as students during the reign of the Shah, and then as refugees driven out by the Islamic Republic. They have no desire to be associated with the Islamic Republic. Many of them actually refer to it as Persia rather than Iran. They are very loyal to the United States. They, by and large, are very well educated, very successful commercially, academically, and they see themselves as part of American society, and if anything, will stand with the United States and with this country, their own country, against the Islamic Republic.
I also want to address the cyber threat. How likely is a cyber attack from Iran, and what form might it take?
That's a good question, Garrett, and that is the far greater danger. What we should keep in mind is that Iran, or the Iranian government, has developed extensive cyber capabilities. I would put them on par with Israel and with Russia. And one of the reasons they've done so is that they have gone, see, most of us, when we study computer science, cyber capabilities, etc., we don't go down to the source code, the machine code level. They do, the Iranians in particular do, so they are very good at conducting attacks. And so that's where we should be vigilant. Now, we should also keep in mind that corporations do experience attacks, not just from the Iranian government and from Iranian proxies, but from all kinds of malicious actors almost on a daily basis. So capabilities of attacks are increasing, but likewise, defensive capabilities are increasing. In terms of our viewers, I would say just make sure you keep your security software updated, and make sure if you work for a corporation that your corporation's security software is kept updated.
Since we're on the subject, I also want to bring in the possibility of a cyber threat against state or local governments. We have seen in the past some cyber attacks directed at, for example, municipal utilities, that sort of thing. How concerned should our local and county governments be about a possible cyber attack directed at some of the things they do?
I would say whenever the United States is at war, local and state entities should be vigilant, extra vigilant, should we say. They should always be vigilant. We should add the extra to that because, yes, far more than being able to reach the U.S. mainland through weapons, shall we say, through munitions, the cyber warfare is actually becoming the new front of attack. And of course, it can do billions of dollars of damage, and it can affect a very large population, if not in terms of physical safety, certainly in terms of inconvenience and in terms of disrupting their daily lives.
So I guess in terms of the three different threats we've talked about the economic issue of gas prices due to the Strait of Hormuz, we've talked about the cyber threat and the traditional terrorist attack threat. I guess how would you rank each of those as they pose a threat specifically to us here in Indiana?
I would say the easiest for Iran, the Iranian government and its proxies to execute would be cyber attacks. Next would come, of course, lone wolf or terror attacks. The ability to actually launch a missile or drone against the United States is extraordinarily rare. We know that Iran tried to reach the American base in the Indian Ocean, Diego Garcia, and the two missiles they launched never made it.
All right, coming up, Indiana's Secretary of State tells us why he partnered with a conservative activist group to sign up new voters after the break. Welcome back. Secretary of State Diego Morales says his voter registration partnership with a Turning Point USA affiliate will not mean partisan voting information. But Democrats have raised serious concerns. Morales sat down with our Garrett Bergquist.
Morales announced earlier this month his office will partner with Club America to hold voter registration drives on high school campuses. Club America is the youth arm of Turning Point USA. Both were founded by the late Charlie Kirk. Club America officials tell me the organization has 65 chapters in Indiana high schools. Morales says they approached him about holding voter registration drives.
And we got excited because I'm looking for ways to partner with any organizations. So I appreciate their initiative, and we became the first Secretary of State in the country to partner to do voter registration with Club America, Garrett. The materials that we've been passing out for the past 3 years and a half.
Morales says Club America will pass out the same materials his office uses for all voter registration events. Any expenses will be part of his regular voter registration budget. He says he's partnered before with organizations such as the State Fair and the Indianapolis Indians, but Club America specifically advocates for conservative causes. And its parent organization, Turning Point USA, also has a campaign arm that endorses candidates. Earlier this month, Senate Minority Leader Shelley Yoder told me that's a red flag.
We definitely need to do a better job of having greater voter turnout in the state of Indiana. But the state going into some type of formal partnership to get that done with an ideological organization, a political arm that has a religious arm all tied into one, I think that is what has Hoosiers concerned.
Is that a problem, though, to have an organization that has at least a somewhat partial relationship with a political action committee?
The partnership that we're doing is with their 501c3, which they are a obviously partisan. We are non-partisans. Myself, as the chief election officer, usually when I go and encourage high schoolers or college-age students to be part of the election process, I'm quickly to tell them, I'm here simply to help you to register to vote, but I cannot tell you who to vote for. That's not my job.
So if, for example, a progressive organization comes forward and says they want to participate, would you extend that same opportunity to them?
I welcome the opportunity to work with any organizations who want to see voter turnout, voter participation go high, which that's one of my goals. You know, in fact, Garrett, with all the work that we've been doing, now we have the highest voter registration rate in 14 years.
Morales also tells me he will recruit poll workers through the Club America partnership. 16 and 17-year-olds can work the polls, and he says you can register to vote before you turn 18 as long as you turn 18 no later than Election Day. At the State House, I'm Garrett Bergquist for Wish TV and WishTV.com.
All right, coming up, a potential deal at last to fund the TSA. Indiana's best political team assesses the latest government shutdown.
The opinions expressed by guests on this broadcast are solely those of the individual speaking and do not necessarily reflect the views or policies of Wish TV.
All right, welcome back to All Indiana Politics as we welcome in two members of Indiana's best political team, IndyPolitics.org publisher Abdul Hakim Shabazz and former state representative Carly Macer. Good to see you both.
Good to be here.
Absolutely. Let's begin with a potential deal to fund the Department of Homeland Security. Abdul, every time, as you very well know, there's a shutdown, the airports become the #1 pressure point. At some point, are Democrats and Republicans going to get together and say, hey, let's figure something out when it comes to funding air traffic controllers and TSA, or are they always going to be a pawn in this type of battle?
Well, in a situation like this, I thought it was interesting because everybody was deadlocked over TSA and funding until, guess what, people got to go on spring break.
Right.
And long lines. And no one wants to sit in a long line in an airport because there's no staff because the government shut down. So I think that was a temporary incentive. But I will say at the end of the day, we can't have government by shutdown. You have to get stuff done. You know, military people got to get paid. You know, transportation's got to be done. So hopefully this will be like the last incentive. But good luck with that one.
Right, Carly, I'll let you weigh in on this.
Yeah, I mean,
well.
I think airline safety and what's happening now with this should be one of the most basics whenever it comes to what we're doing as a government. And just what Americans, Hoosiers, are facing whenever it comes to what we're dealing with right now in these long lines. But most importantly, the safety of what's happening too should be never on the table. I feel like this should be something that we shouldn't even be talking about today, and it shouldn't be a back and forth issue.
Right.
This should be something that should be automatic and something that travelers and Americans should not even be thinking about.
Yeah, I think we can all agree on that. To the politics of it all, though, did anyone win this battle, politically speaking?
No. nobody won.
No, and Americans don't care about political points with either party at this time. They just want safety, they want transparency, and they don't want to be thinking about government.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's turn the conversation to what we saw this week, the Indiana utility regulatory questioning utilities over the rates that they charge. Carly, the chair of the IURC, says he did not hear any real solutions from them for rising utility rates. In your opinion, is that a fair assessment?
You know, I don't know if it's a fair assessment, but I will tell you, as far as what Hoosiers are seeing, again, is, this is all about transparency, and it's hard for, I think, Hoosiers to understand how a deal like this could happen and it not hit them on the bottom line. I mean, it's just hard to understand that, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this continues to evolve. I understand where he's coming from, but I think for Hoosiers, it's still very uncertain.
Mm-hmm. Abdul, was the biggest takeaway what was said or maybe what wasn't said?
I think that's what wasn't said. And I interviewed Jeff Harrison, the president of Citizens Energy, this week for Indy Politics. And he made an interesting point. Abdul, we're affected by inflation too, just like everybody else is.
Right.
Your costs go up, our costs go up. Our cost to deliver energy, our cost to treat water. So I think it's a bad situation that it's nobody's fault, but to a certain degree, it's everybody's fault. Of course, I could also argue you could also lower your utility rates by closing the windows, keeping the temperature thermostat, adjusting your tires, all the things they taught us, back in the 1980s and 1990s. And so maybe that's part of what people can do in the interim, sort of mitigate some of those high energy costs.
Carly, you want to?
Well, I just think that, we all know that infrastructure is desperately needed, but we also know that the confidence for consumers and ratepayers is not even on the table. It shouldn't be. It should be automatic.
Right.
And trust is everything.
Right. Yeah, we'll see what happens with that. Let's turn now to that interview that we heard a little while ago about the threat that Iran poses, or maybe doesn't pose, here in Indiana. Carly, do you think the state is doing enough to protect Hoosiers when it comes to a possible cyber attack or maybe even an attack on public utilities?
Well, I think it's always evolving, and having an opportunity to serve on utilities, I know the work that goes on behind the scenes, and we know this is something, warfare is not the same. And as it was years ago, it's so different now, and it's so important for us to continue to make sure that we're doing absolutely everything that we can to make sure that it's safe for Hoosiers. But we also know that what happens globally certainly can affect us very quickly. And so there's always something new to learn as far as safety and helping to make sure that we're doing everything that we can when it comes to our infrastructure.
Abdul, your thoughts on that?
I've never been a big fan of wars of choice. Never been a big fan of wars of choice. My parents served in the military, Army brat, lived overseas for a few years, so I totally completely understand what's going on. Now, with that said, obviously you can't let the Iranians just go bat crap crazy. But at the same time, though, it's a war of choice thing, and so now we're all sort of on that heightened sense of alert again, almost sort of like 9/11 to a certain degree, because you never know. It's not going to be a military target; it's going to be soft targets, and so that's why it requires local, state, national officials to work together and not compromise, but collaborate a little bit better to make sure that are safe, but also requires people to, if you see something, say something.
Sure.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
And global stability, I think no matter what, I think this also goes outside of the safety aspect is the affordability. We talk so much about that. It's just such a connection to, it's all connected to the affordability for Hoosiers and Americans as well.
And Abdul, I wanted to just, ask you this one. As far as President Trump goes, he keeps going back and forth as to whether or not they're having peace talks with Iran. Is that maybe a sign that the gas price spike is having an impact here and playing a role?
I think when the president saw long lines at airports and people going on spring break, because the president, he watches a lot of the talking head shows, the national talking head shows, and the joke is the last talking head that he hears is probably what he's going to do. And when he probably saw on our friends at Fox News, these long lines, people complaining, TSA agents basically standing around drinking Starbucks coffee while people are sitting in long lines. That was like, okay, we need to do something about this right now.
Yeah, Carly?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's just rhetoric to me, but it all comes down to safety. It's ridiculous that Americans are even having to be, that this is what their government is providing for them. And it just is rhetoric, and it's unsafe, and it's wrong.
I'm almost out of time. I want to get both of your thoughts on the Diego Morales interview that we talked about. 30 seconds to you, Abdul.
Diego Morales in Indiana politics is the captain of the Titanic.
Yeah.
Strong
I'll
words,
just
fair
say
enough.
optics matter. And we all know, again, Hoosiers and what we went through with the redistricting, the untrust that we already have. If it looks untrusty, it is untrusty, and the optics do matter. And that's exactly, no matter what we hear from the Secretary of State, Diego, about the not tilting it one way or the other, ask Hoosiers. How do they feel about it?
Right.
It's black and white. They see it.
I'm sorry, I take that back. It's Andrea Dorian, not the Titanic.
There we go. Okay, thanks for cleaning that up. Thank you very much. Good to see you both. Thank you very much for being here. And we will be right back.
The opinions expressed by guests on this broadcast are solely those of the individual speaking and do not necessarily reflect the views or policies of Wish TV.
Thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics this week. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30. And be sure to check out the All Indiana Politics podcast online at wishtv.com. Have a great rest of your weekend.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Watch All Indiana Politics live Sunday mornings at 9:30 on Wish TV and at wishtv.com. Subscribe to this podcast and listen weekly here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And be sure to discover even more great podcasts at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.